Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of RE042, where I take old videos and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Double Dog Dare, written by RegalLegalEagle. Just a quick note, if you like this sort of content, hit the like button, and I would be truly honored if you hit the subscribe button. But let's go on to the story. What happened? Did you see it? Are you okay? The other kids were crowded around Ricky as he panted, out of breath from his run back down the mountain. He nodded slowly and was bent over, hands on knees, as he gasped for air. Yeah, I saw it. It's a really scary story. Ricky gasped out as he slowly caught his breath and then looked back over his shoulder at Bone Peak back in the distance. So what happened? I just heard that you were doing something crazy. Ricky looked back and nodded at Matt, who hadn't been there at the start. Well, we heard some stuff in the distance, and there was the rumor about something happening in the old ruins at the top of the Bone Peak, and I really wasn't sure about going up there, but then that stupid fart-face, Freddy, of course, showed up. Ricky huffed and stood up now as he'd gotten his wind back. I'm right here, you know, Freddy said at the back of the group, standing easily a head taller than everyone else, as the younger kids backed up to give him a bit of room. I know you are, but you're still a fart-face, Ricky shouted back. It all started with a, "I double dog dared you, brat." Freddy crossed his arms and looked down at Ricky and the other members of Ricky's Rangers. A hush fell over them as the others gasped and Ricky just growled up at the older boy. There's no need for something like that, Tina said nervously as she pulled at Ricky's sleeve. It's too dangerous, Ricky. Don't let him get to you. Normally I would agree, but it is a double dog dare. The rules regarding the double dog dares are pretty serious, Tina, Jeff mentioned nervously from the side. And I accept, Ricky shouted with determination as he puffed up as tall as he could get, which really wasn't tall at all. But he held his shield and sword close as he tried to strike a heroic pose. The wood barrel that he used as a shield and the wood sword were his prized possessions that had helped him find a new adventuring group, Ricky's Rangers. If he didn't live up to the code he had set now, then he would never make a name for himself. No, don't be a turd, Freddy huffed. I just said it as a joke. You're not going up to Bone Peak while there are monsters around. You heard what people in town were saying. No, I'm going to bring back treasure. Just you wait, Ricky shouted. And before Freddy could grab him, the others could try and stop him. He had turned and started running through the bushes. Yeah, you idiot, Freddy was calling out as the double dog dare had been issued, and Ricky had to live by his code. So he was running, jumping and ducking his way through the forest faster than Freddy could move, especially since Ricky knew these woods better than anyone. The hill known as Bone Break wasn't the worst terrain in the world, and thanks to a few old trails, Ricky could make it to the top in about an hour, mostly because as eager as he was, his legs were rather short. So I climbed the mountain for like 2 hours, Ricky told the crowd around him. Higher and higher I went, all the way to the ruins at the top. There was the old ruins, like the jagged ribs of a long-dead corpse sitting on top of the mountain. The other kids gasped as he said that, and then he continued in a softer tone. And there on the path before me was the first monster I'd find, a fierce skull crab, the biggest I'd ever seen. It was scavenging a body of what must have been its latest kill. The other kids gasped out once more and leaned back as he told his tale. Ricky's heart was beating fast in his chest as he spied the crab before him. It was slightly above average for most of the indigenous rock crabs, called skull crabs due to their particular white and black coloring that, when viewed from certain angles, made it look a bit like their main body was inside a skull. However, slightly above average still meant that it was about 2.5 feet across. It was currently picking at an old set of rusted metal armor that was covered in leaves and moss. It picked up the top of the chest, slowly dragging it over to its body as it turned to look Ricky with curiosity, almost as if seeing what Ricky thought of his new hat. Back, you evil monster, Ricky shouted out and jumped forward as he brought his wooden sword down on the rusted metal chest plate. There was more of a thud than a clang, and the crab let go of the chest piece and scurried off into the bushes with haste. Ricky stood proud after his victory and reached down to pick up the old chest piece, his first bit of treasure, in what would clearly become a lifetime of adventure. Oh, that's it. You smacked a crab and picked up an old trash. Ooh, a real scary story, Freddy asked with a snort and laughter. Shut up, Freddy. I'm not done. Ricky shouted back at the older kid, snarled at him and stayed quiet. So there I was at the edge of the ruins when I saw something up ahead. There was a set of stairs that led down into the heart of the mountain itself, and I could hear something, so I went to check it out. Ricky tossed aside the old chess piece once he saw how rusted and corroded it was, but he did head further into the old ruins. He saw a few discarded bits of armor here and there, a broken hilt, some old crates that had been left out so long that the wood had rotted down to almost nothing. But the stone ruins around weren't totally empty of excitement when he saw a staircase at the back that looked like it headed down into the hill. He slowly drew near and could see a faint light flickering down in what should be a totally dark hall. He hesitated as he tried to think about just what he'd have to bring back to prove that he'd been here. Then he heard a clatter behind him and saw that a skull crab had returned, this time with 2 other skull crabs. They were chasing after him, so he quickly rushed down the stairs and deeper into the ruins. Meanwhile, behind him the crabs kept jumping and snapping at the butterfly that was fluttering just out of reach, which they'd been following out of curiosity. As Ricky rushed down the stairs, he found that some old torches must have been lit recently, as they were flickering on the walls and lighting his way deeper into the old tunnels under the ruins above. The issue for Ricky was that he didn't know where to look. There were halls and rooms spread out all around him, and his heart was pounding hard in his chest as he kept looking different ways for some sort of monster to jump out at him, which is why it came as a surprise when he rounded a corner looking ahead of him and he ran into something that rattled from the impact as he fell back onto his butt. As he rubbed his face, he then opened his eyes as he looked up at what he ran into. Then he let out a horrified gasp as he discovered just what it was he'd found. It was a huge skeleton warrior. It was clutching a giant war axe with a blade bigger than my head. It had fire in its eyes, and I was staring down at me with hate. It was just huge. It must have belonged to an ogre or a giant, Ricky was saying as Freddy snorted. These were dwarven runes, turd. If there was even any skeleton at all, they'd be short as you. Ricky stuck out his tongue at Freddy then, but continued his heroic tale without letting the other kid derail him. So I rolled back up to my feet, and then lunged forward with all my might as I cut his head off. Ricky held up his wooden sword triumphantly as the other kids gasped. Ricky smacked the skull of the dwarf skeleton off its shoulders, and the skeleton promptly reached up to where its head should be, feeling around for a moment. On the ground nearby, the dwarven skull, with a beard still fastened to its jaw, chattered away, and the skeleton slowly began to walk towards it, feeling around on the ground after dropping the regular hatchet it had been holding. Ricky took this chance to run past while the skeleton tried to find its head. Then he skidded to a halt just as it got to the next room. It was an entire room filled with more skeletons. They had axes and hammers and these strange, jagged swords. They were building some giant siege engine, no doubt to lay siege to the town. So I had to stop them. I went tearing through them, slashing and smashing. Ricky held sword and shield high now, as the other kids gave out appropriate oohs and ahs. That doesn't make sense. Why would they make a siege engine under the ground? And why would they need it to siege the town? There aren't any walls, Freddy asked next. You weren't there, Freddy, Ricky huffed. The dwarven skeletons looked towards Ricky for a moment and then returned to their work. They were hammering, sawing, and chopping to fix the furniture that had been left to rot in the room, breaking apart the wood too far gone to fix and using it to fasten wood nails and other bits to help put together everything they could save. When Ricky screamed and went running through the room with his eyes almost closed, he smacked into several of them, bouncing off as he went careening past and out the room. The skeletons paused once as he was gone and began to help attach bones back together that he'd knocked off in his run through the room. Looking back over his shoulder once he was out of the other side, Ricky just kept running, fearing that the horde of skeletons would be sure to chase after him. But now he was heading down another staircase, deeper still into the hill. The torches on the walls were still flickering, which meant they'd been lit recently, and he could see. But there were sounds up ahead that made him slow down as he got to the bottom of the staircase. He could hear the clatter and clang of metal on metal. Fighting. Gulping hard, he raised his wooden barrel of a shield up before him and hesitantly moved deeper down the hall. Between the skeletons he knew were behind him and the unknown sounds of battle ahead, he felt like forward was his only option. He also noticed that despite being deeper underground, it felt like things were getting warmer. As he rounded another corner, he didn't run into any monsters, but he didn't watch his step and accidentally tread on the tail of a lizard that let out a surprised cry, which in turn made Ricky let out a terrified scream at the sudden noise and went running forward. As he ran ahead, with shield and sword before him, this time, when he rounded a corner, he ran into something. It wasn't a skeleton, and he didn't fall down, but rather bounced off of it. He blinked as he looked at the figure before him. There was a big team of big lizard men. They were snarling and growling creatures with horns and long pointy tails, and they were clutching vicious-looking weapons, spears and daggers, even bows. They were savages, wearing loincloths, and they all had these blue armbands that no doubt was a sign of their evil master, Ricky was saying, as the kids gasped more. Wait, Freddy muttered. Was it a blue band that had a black circle and a red dot in it? Yes, that was it, Ricky nodded. You idiot! Those are kobolds. Again, they're so small as you are, and those ones are part of the local militia alliance. They are evil monsters. Do you hit any of them? Freddy asked, and Ricky shrunk a little bit. Well, I fended them off and kept going, so, maybe? Ricky screamed and waved his sword in front of him wildly as the kobolds squeaked and backed up to the sides of the hall. He took the chance and passed by. He hadn't hit any of them, but he certainly surprised them by showing up randomly behind them. Then one of them hissed out and tried and reached out for him, as if trying to get him to stop. He ran on and beyond their reach quickly, and into deeper parts of the tunnels. When he got to the junction up ahead, he could see the kobolds behind him waving at him for him to come back, even though none of them were advancing past the little checkpoint to come get him. He wondered why they weren't coming after him, just as he heard a groan and creak, and looked down at the wooden planks he was standing on. Finally, there was a loud crack, and he cried out as he fell through the wood floor there, landing on an old wood crate a level down, which broke his fall for a moment, before it too collapsed, and he was on the floor in a heap of old, broken planks. Groaning, Ricky grabbed for his sword, which had escaped his grip, and pulled it in close. He was in a storeroom of some sorts, and while there was a torch flickering in the corner of the hallway, outside the room was mostly dark. He could hear the sounds of battle even more clearly, and then gasped hard as he heard a hiss, then a scream as green blood splashed up against the wall before him. A moment later, a massive dark figure filled the doorway. There it was, a werewolf, and this thing was huge, really, really huge. It filled the whole doorway, its ears scraping against the top. It was in this heavy armor with a big sword dripping green blood and wearing this red clothing. It slowly stomped towards me, fangs menacing and white, and the flickering light of the single torch in the corner. I thought I was done for. It came closer still, eyes gleaming, one a different color than the other. Ricky had the crowd eating out of his hands now, as they were all silent. Even Freddy couldn't find anything to critique yet. And then he spoke. Steve! Benra turned her head to call down There's a kid in here. What? Came a call from down the hall before there was a loud explosion, and Fenrina shielded her eyes for a moment, the flash of fire illuminating her body more clearly as Ricky lay sprawled out, still in shock. Steve! Stop, drop, and roll! She yelled down the hall. I know how to behave while I'm on fire, came the quick reply. Don't go anywhere, kid, Fenrina said to Ricky before she rushed down the hall. Ricky, who had no idea who Fenrina was, or Steve for that matter, took his chance to get up and run out of the storeroom and down the hall away from the direction the werewolf went, only to skid to a halt as another figure emerged from the shadows before him. This was a demon. She had a big horns and claws with flaming whip. I thought for sure that she was going to try and eat me or something, but instead she just smiled, which kind of worse. I was terrified, I won't lie, Ricky nodded. And then she also spoke. Ooh, look at you, little adventurer, here exploring. Didn't the kobolds upstairs stop you? It's dangerous in here. Come on, we need to find the others. Ricky just gulped and didn't know what else to do as Sherry turned around and guided him back to the others. Steve was smoldering a little, sprawled out on the ground as Fenrina stomped on him a few more times to make sure that the fire was out. Not my idea of helping, Steve muttered as Fenrina backed up. You're no longer on fire, are you? She asked. Ricky was looking around the room they were in, though, with awe. There were massive spider corpses all around, and what looked like giant vault doors they were guarding. I guess not, Steve muttered, and slowly got up, brushing himself off as he saw Ricky. Who brought a kid? I found him, and then you burst into flames, so I came to help, Fenrina said. Stupid kobolds. I told them not to let anyone down in here. Between the dwarf craftsman I raised and the drider we were fighting, this is no place for a kid to be. What are you even doing here? He asked. I was. Ricky looked down hesitantly. Double talk dead, he finally admitted. Ah, Steve nodded. Fair enough. I've been there. Well, it's still dangerous here, kid. We need to get you out before... There was an evil cackle that filled the room. Then, as the vault door slammed open from the inside and the drider walked out, Foolish here, spellslinger. Here's your shell. Here you shall meet your doom. Then the drider paused. Is that a child? Did you bring a child with you on this adventure? That's irresponsible. I didn't bring him. He wandered in here and is on his own. Now back up, kid, and stay behind us, because things are about to get messy. So the werewolf was on all snarling and cleaving into the giant spiders, and the demon was using her burning whip and even tore apart the spider with her claws. They were slowly getting pushed back because there were many. But the spellslinger called forth all skeleton warriors to join the fight. And then he was throwing around magic all over. He used fire and lightning and then froze the drider in a big block of ice and said she needed to chill out, Ricky was saying. There is no way, Freddy finally interrupted. There is no way that you met Spellslinger. You just happened to meet one only 3 human mages ever, and he let you stay while I fought a drider? No way. Yeah, way. And I have proof they gave me after. Ricky reached into a pouch and then pulled out a spider fang that was several inches long. The kids all clustered around and gasped as they saw it. On top of that, they gave me a super magic legendary shield. Ricky pulled his new shield off his back, the wooden barrel lid having been replaced with an actual metal shield that was so heavy that he had to put a fang away to hold it with both hands. Well, that was interesting, Sherry said as she looked around the room at the various spider corpses and dwarven skeletons that had already begun to clean up. Yeah, and you didn't do too bad either, kid. Steve ruffled up Ricky's hair, even though all he'd really done was stay out of the fight and not get killed. But what are you really doing here? I mean, what was the double dog dare? It was to find monsters and treasure. Steve nodded and walked over to one of the large spiders, cutting off a fang to toss to Ricky. Don't worry, these types don't have toxins in their fangs. And as for treasure, he walked past the frozen drider and into the vault before there was a flash of blue light. Then he walked back out holding a dwarven shield that glowed softly in the light. A legendary treasure to start your legendary career. Whoa! Ricky reached up to take it and then grunted a little as he staggered back under the weight. The shield gleamed softly as he held it. What's it do? That would ruin the fun of being an adventurer. You've got to find out for yourself. Now head down that hallway and take the first left, and you'll hear some rushing water. That means you're going the right way. Follow it all the way out through the crack, and you'll be behind the waterfall at the old mill pond. You know the one? Ricky nodded as he asked. Then you'll be nearly home. Now, get going. We've got some work to do. He ruffled up Ricky's hair once more, and then Ricky went running off down the hall, following the directions. The kids were all reaching out to touch the faintly glowing shield, and even Freddy had to finally admit defeat as he slowly nodded. Okay, maybe you're telling the truth. I guess you did find some scary monsters and treasure. But that wasn't even the scariest part, Ricky said, as the others were confused. More monsters on your way from the old mill pond? Freddy asked. I'd just gotten out from behind the edge of the waterfall, and there must have been one more evil skeleton champion. He was wearing this heavy set of armor that I couldn't see his face, but his voice was deep. Larry swears it was a joke. Come back! Larry wasn't really trying to fry you. Ricky frowned as he approached the dwarf who was looking around the bushes near the pond. He clutched his new shield to him with both hands, unsure if it was another undead dwarf skeleton or armor or not. But it had to be. Otherwise, how could it sound like that? Hello? He hesitantly asked as he got close. The dwarf then turned and, to his horror, he'd certainly not been prepared to hear. "Hey kid, have you seen Larry Love's cock?"
"So I ran out of there as fast as I could," Ricky said, "and then I got here, and here we are."
He nodded as his story finally came back full circle.
"But the scariest part isn't over yet for you, Freddy."
He pointed as the older boy blinked in surprise and frowned. "Scariest part for me? What are you talking about?" He took a nervous step back.
"The scariest part for you is just beginning, because I'm going to tell Mom that you double-dog dared me to go up to the ruins all on my own and didn't come with to keep me safe,"
he shouted, and Freddy's eyes went wide. "Oh, you, yeah, wait, come back!" Ricky was already running past everyone, and Freddy gave chase, desperately pleading with his younger brother not to tell their mom on him. But for Freddy, the scary part of his story was just beginning. Meanwhile, "I can't believe you brought your rooster with us, Larry," Steve mentioned as Larry hugged his pet rooster to his chest, petting it with his hand.
"Are you kidding me? I hear him talk about it constantly,"
Ben Rena shouted.
"Once you guys told me the other word for rooster, it all made so much more sense. I mean, he's just crazy about that thing. He brags about it to the elven lady friends all the time."
As Fenrina said that, both Sherry and Steve stared at the dwarf. "Larry Love apologizes for nothing, but he did see a strange kid earlier who ran screaming past Larry Love for some reason," Larry mentioned as he lifted his rooster up and set it on his head as it perched comfortably on the dwarf's helm. "Oh yeah, I hope the kid got home okay. The kobolds were so shocked to see a kid down here, they let him through. Idiots. But we got him through this okay," Steve shrugged.
"Speaking of, what did you do to the shield?"
Sherry asked as she set the runes around the frozen Drider to get her ready to get it back to Orbitus to face trial. "Oh, just a minor incantation of light."
"That's it. His legendary shield just shines in the dark," she asked.
"What did you want me to cast in it? Greater invulnerability that would last all of a day. For a kid? Hardly. Look, this way it'll be magic for years, and it's harmless. In fact, he can use it to see too, which means it's actually useful. Let him grow into it. He could barely lift the thing." Steve waved it off and then turned back to the Drider. "Did you hear my line when I froze you?"
"Yes, Stephen, I heard."
Sherry rolled her eyes. "Proud of your line?" "I really am," he grinned.
"Think we'll ever see that kid again?"
Benrina asked, and Steve just shrugged. "Always need new adventurers. Never know how they'll get their start. So, maybe. I guess time will tell. But you've got to respect any kid who's willing to take a double-dog dare that far. It's the mark of a real hero or, an idiot. I guess we'll see which one's which one day." One day, Steve would indeed encounter Ricky's Rangers once more. But that is a tale for another time. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.